So the full version of that talk is going to be located on the GC website, so you can all access that conversation after our event today. And now we're going to move forward in a different direction to storytelling and the power of using stories to inform people who perhaps aren't in the know about circular economy, the day-to-day people, about what it is to live a circular life. Every human life begins with childhood. We laugh, we play, we discover the world with our hands and our feet, our nose and our mouth. We take risks because the concept of risk is non-existent. And curiosity is our only guide in the world. But with each passing day, we get older. And suddenly childhood becomes adulthood. And with adulthood comes a series of different responsibilities, altering even perhaps the way that we view the world. We become students, workers, managers, family members. And in that transition, maybe we've lost something. But then some of us are lucky to find love. And that love takes us in a completely different direction, 7,000 miles away from home, to an island called Taiwan, where you end up following trash trucks for 7 hours to understand local waste management systems. That's what happened to me. I grew up in San Diego, California, in the United States of America, and I fell in love with Taiwanese bubble tea. That's a fact. There was a Taiwanese tea house down the street from my father's apartment, and I would go there like it was my second home. Every day, I would go and I would order a large iced milk tea with half sugar, sometimes boba, sometimes not. And I would sit there, and I grew up at that tea house. I wrote my first love letter there. I studied for my SATs there. And when I graduated from college, I went back to that same tea house, sat in that same orange chair facing the same window to ask myself that post-graduation quintessential question. What the hell am I going to do with my life? And in that moment, I was extremely frustrated. There were so many problems happening in the world and so much pressure to make it in a certain way. And I knew that I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something that could affect people and our environment. I just wasn't sure what or how or why. And it was in that moment when I reached for my milk tea that I finally saw the plastic cup. And I finally saw the plastic straw. And I turned around to the trash can behind me and I saw it filled to the brim with all the other single-use disposable plastic cups and straws. And I thought about the millions of people every single day who use a single-use item for a few seconds and throw it away, to completely forget about it. And I realized that in that moment that every time that I drink the drink that I really love, I'm harming the environment that I love. Because in my country and in my city specifically, our waste management system wasn't very great. You just put it in bags and kind of take it away to the landfill. It would leak into the ocean. And the Pacific Ocean was just 5 minutes away by car from where I was sitting. And with that realization that I was interlocked with an island 7,000 miles away from home, that I needed to do something to understand this plastic supply chain that connects us all together. So I applied for a National Geographic grant, and I went to Taiwan. And I went there to understand not only waste management systems, but the stories of the people who operate in these invisible lines that we almost take for granted, that we ignore, but are so critical to our day-to-day lives. And in learning about these people who segregate waste, who collect waste, and hearing about their stories, I suddenly realized that there were so many stories behind this concept of circular economy, that it wasn't just about plastic or trash, that it was about the intention and the willpower of people to make a difference in their day-to-day lives, however softly, however quietly, in their own way. So today, I want to share with you stories of circular economy, stories of individuals around the world in Taiwan and Bangladesh and India who are living this model because they believe in something greater than themselves. That this concept is not a foreign concept, an abstract concept, an academic concept, a political concept. It is something that every single person can do and live. And as a storyteller, I believe that stories have the power to change the world and our perspectives in the way that we live our day-to-day lives. So allow me to share their stories with you. The first story is about love. The power of love to transform not only a community, but an entire system driven by the power of motherly love. Let me take you back to 1987 Taiwan. This was a tumultuous time in which there was a transition between almost 4 decades of martial law to a democracy. And in the process of that transition, happening simultaneously was the rise of Taiwan as one of the great Asian tigers. They had grown tremendously economically, in part due to their petrochemical plastics industry. But with the rise of growth comes the byproduct of waste. And there was no formal waste management infrastructure. In fact, people would take their trash and haphazardly throw it on the street corners, thinking that some local municipal truck would come once in a while before the dogs or the typhoons would get to it. Then, a group of housewives, now known as the Homemakers United Foundation, said, enough is enough. They were sick and tired of having to walk their kids through trash to get to school every day. Sick and tired of thinking of no matter how many times they would clean their home, pollution would come back in. So they started Taiwan's first environmental advocacy group. And they are the architects of what's now known by the Wall Street Journal as one of the world's geniuses of garbage disposal, based in Taipei City, now modeled in Taiwan. And what they did is they created a waste segregation system that every single person has ownership and is a part of. So you separate your waste from your wet waste, your recyclables, which have 33 different subcategories, to your burnables. Some people, when they hear this song, da-na-na-na, na-na-na-na, grab the trash bags, da-na-na-na, na-na-na-na, and they'll come right to the street corner and they'll physically dump their waste into a trash truck. Again, taking ownership, physically touching their waste. And they created that system. And they were the ones who piloted the composting system as well. They got their community, about 900 families in their neighborhood, to try this before they took it to the city government. Because up until that time, the city government said, you're a bunch of housewives. What do you know about waste? And they demonstrated the power of love alone and ingenuity and persistence that they could do something. And that model is now being replicated across the island. They also banned styrofoam across the food and beverage industry, which we all know is not recyclable. And in fact, if you've ever done a beach cleanup, you'll recognize that what you think are seashells on the actual shore are styrofoam pieces. That no matter how many times you grab, they slip through your fingers. And imagine where that's going in the world. And they also removed single-use disposable plastics from public schools and public offices. Think about it. A group of moms did this. The second story I want to share with you is that products are like people. So we go through life in different stages, childhood, adulthood. We take on different roles, mother, worker, lover, all these different things. We go through different stages of development, but so do our products. That water bottle that you have was once a fossil in the ground, and now has become a carrier for a vital life force, and ultimately can be used to make fibers for ceremonial robes for a monk here in Bangkok. So that concept of development, the fact that we have different stages of development, is unique not just to us as human beings, but to products as well, to nations as well. So let's take an example of an industrial design from circular economy in Taiwan. Let me introduce you to T.A. Wu.
Soundproof. Very cool.
So what you see there are these construction bricks, and they are made out of recycled LCD glass from your cell phones. So he's taken them and make them into these bricks that are soundproof and fireproof. And in fact, I tested that because he told me to put my hand on the back side of that brick when the flame was coming at it, and I was like, I don't know if he's like, just put your hand there. So I put my hand there, and nothing happened. It's still here. Right. So that's industrial ingenuity, right? And I think the metaphor of glass recycling is so much like people. We're hot, we're cold, we simmer. Sometimes we break into pieces and have to be put back together. But we always are of the same essence as we track through life. And likewise, glass can be recycled infinitely without losing its quality. So products are like people when you think about development. The third story is about the power of young people to make a difference. Oftentimes, young people will sit in university halls or in their classrooms and they say, this problem is big, I want to do something, I just don't know what to do. And as they get older, the problem becomes more and more overwhelming. They're inundated with these dark images and they don't know what to do. So they stop. This is an example of two young women in Taiwan who were so influenced by that viral YouTube video of a turtle with a plastic straw up its nose, and the 8 minutes it took with a pair of pliers to pull it out and to physically see that animal start crying and blood being spilled on the ground. That affected them so much that they decided to dedicate their lives to building a company for glass straws. And not just glass straws that you can sip boba out of and have a good time. No, they went around to cafes across the island to create a unified form of people who are invested in transforming the consumption culture in cafes and in tea culture, transforming plastic into glass. And not only did they do that, they were able to connect eco-entrepreneurs, people across the island who are making soaps and shampoos and all that stuff, and they put them in these suitcases. So now, if you go to one of the cafes they work with, you'll find entrepreneurial materials made by Taiwanese for Taiwanese to experience and live the circular economy. And the last story I want to tell you is a story from India and Bangladesh. The circularity is not some concept from a different place. It is embedded in many of the cultures in this region. So I just finished a National Geographic expedition where I spent the last 2 months with a team of international scientists starting in the Bay of Bengal, living on a boat, trapping up the Ganges River up into the summit of the Himalayas. And we did this in order to understand how plastic flows from the riverways into the ocean, testing litter on the ground, water samples for microplastics, conducting socioeconomic surveys in 10 different communities across India to understand how people are using plastic and what the relationship is between poverty, access, socioeconomics, and plastics use. So this interdisciplinary model was our way of trying to figure out what to do about the plastics problem. But in this, we discovered stories of people in India, in Bangladesh, who are living circular economy. We met a man named Matthew, an industrialist who runs a paper-making factory. And he told me that circular economy for the Western world is an aspiration. But circular economy for the developing world is a necessity. There's a market for it. It is embedded in the way people have used resources that they haven't had access to. So I met people who would recycle hair, who would collect hair from dump sites and wash the long strands of hair, package it, and send it to Delhi, and then it would be sent to make wigs for people in the Western world. We walked into alleyways where there were circular economy car factories, and I'm talking not factories in the sense of like a big building, a teeny alleyway where every single car part was tucked into a nook and corner, from your helmet to your light to a nut and bolt. And people had been there for 3 generations recycling car parts because they didn't have the money to afford to buy a new one if something had gone wrong. So this concept is not a new concept to this region, to these people. Likewise in Thailand, I just got a coconut leaf hat the other day. It's the most amazing thing in the world. If that's not circular economy, what is? In Bangladesh, for Ramadan, they bring clothes because the idea is when you celebrate this holy festival, you bring in the new year with something new clothes, new look, new shoes. But many people in that country can't afford to buy new clothes. So they've set up these centers in communities. People could drop off clothes, and anyone from anywhere can walk up and get something, a used piece of clothing, for their home. It was just in the middle of a neighborhood that we found we were tracking litter. So the idea that I want to leave with you all today is that circular economy is a mindset. It is the way that you perceive and look at the world. It is the way that you perceive and look in your life and ask yourself, what kind of life do you want to live? What kind of country do you want to have? What kind of environment do you want to contribute to and live in? And if we can see us using goods, not just for one thing with one purpose, but that plastic bag that you use when you go to the street market to get your lunch can be used for many different things. Where it comes from, how it's made, why it goes, where does it go, where it goes. If we can start thinking like this, instead of like this, then there's hope for a new beginning and a new future. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Lillygol Sedaghat from the National Geographic Society.
And now I'd like to introduce a video by Dr. Jenna Jambeck, who wrote the 2015 paper about river being conduits for plastic pollution into the ocean. She was not able to join us today. She's actually in Delhi doing the wrap-up of our expedition, which is why I'm here. But she has a video for you. Please enjoy.
My name is Jenna Jambeck. I'm an environmental engineer, professor, and National Geographic Fellow. I'm also co-leading the Sea to Source plastic expedition along with Heather Coldaway from the Zoological Society of London. I grew up in a really small town, less than 3,000 people in the state of Minnesota, and I spent a lot of time outdoors, and it was my goal to do a job where I felt like I was able to help the environment. And so I became an environmental engineer. We study things, but then we study them in order to come up with solutions. When I looked at solid waste management, there's a lot of things that we can do. Going back to sort of the choices that we make every day, the products that we buy, the things that we consume, because the best thing to do with waste is not create it in the first place. But even then, if we want to participate in this circular economy, we want to pick packaging that we know can be recycled. And then even sort of further downstream, if we see waste that is mismanaged, we can participate in cleaning up. And part of that is hopefully also collecting data. So using, for example, the mobile app that we developed called Marine Debris Tracker, if you're picking up litter, participating in cleanups, and you collect this data, we're able to know what's ending up leaking out of the system. And then we can help create change within the systems and design of products to try to prevent those from leaking out in the future. One activity I do with my students at the University of Georgia is to have them record everything they touch that's plastic in 24 hours. And this really is about sort of our relationship with a specific waste material, because so many things that are so useful that we cannot imagine our lives without and are not going away, like electronics, but then they're also recording some of the single-use items, beverage bottles, food wrappers, and they really sort of get a feel, how are we using this material? Having visited a lot of the countries in Southeast Asia, including Thailand, I think there we have to think about the system innovation. And then I think there's innovation of materials with using technology, mobile phone technology, RFID technology for reusable, truly biodegradable plastics. What really became evident to me when I conducted my research about plastic ending up in the ocean, it was very much driven by population density. And that means that every action that each one of us does matters, because when I looked at a population, if there was a high population and there was only a slight change in either a waste generation rate or a leakage rate, that number changed significantly. So if you make a change, you encourage your friends, your family, collectively, we can all make a difference.